A very good evening. You're watching News 9 Facebook Live with me, Adarsh. Well, there is only one thing on all of our minds as to what will Lockdown 4.0 look like. In fact, just a few moments ago, you had the Ministry of Home Affairs, obviously with cooperation from the NDMA, which has come out and given out the guidelines, the new set of rules for Lockdown 4.0. Now, first things first, the lockdown has been extended till the 31st of May. This is not a new bit of information because the Prime Minister himself a few days ago had announced that the fourth phase of lockdown will be in place till the 31st of May. So that will be the case and it will come into effect starting tomorrow, that is Monday the 18th of May. Now, in fact, what will the fourth phase of lockdown look like? What will be open? What will be closed? What are the few surprises? What are the few leeways? What are the few restrictions? Is what we're going to discuss in this brief interaction. I have all the details right here with me as to what the Ministry of Home Affairs in conjunction with the NDMA, that is the National Disaster Management Authority, have come up with for the fourth phase of lockdown. So in the next few minutes, I shall be telling you as to what will be open and what will be closed for the next 14 days or so, that is 2 weeks till the end of May, till the 31st of May. So here it goes. First things first, we shall discuss as to what will remain prohibited till the 31st of May. So what is not allowed, what will be off bounds, out of reach, is what we shall speak about firstly. Now, one of the first things that the government has noted is that all airline services, all flight services will continue to be prohibited till the end of this month for the entire fourth phase of lockdown. You will not be able to catch a flight from point A to point B. Now, this is except for domestic medical services, domestic air ambulance, and for security purposes or purposes as permitted by the Ministry of Home Affairs. So it's only for the emergency services that you will have a flight taking off. But apart from that, if a regular person, a passenger would like to go from point A to point B in a flight, that will not be possible. This apart, metro rail services in all of the big cities will also be out of bound, out of reach, so you will not be able to board a metro. Up until recently, there was a word doing the rounds as to how the metro services may be initiated in the big cities, at least maybe 33% or maybe 50% capacity, but it has now been clearly stated by the Ministry of Home Affairs. They have instructed that metro rail services should not be operational till the end of this month for the entire phase of Lockdown 4.0. Next up, all education institutions, that is schools, colleges, training institutes, coaching institutes, will continue to remain closed till the 31st of May. Online and distance learning, but the online education that we are slowly shifting to has been promoted, and all education institutions have been encouraged to get more into online coaching or online training to carry out lessons, to carry out classes for the students. So that, in a sense, has been pushed by the government of India. Hotels, restaurants, and other hospitality services, except those meant for housing, health, or police or government officials or healthcare workers, stranded persons, including tourists, and for quarantine facilities and running of canteens at bus depots, railway stations, and airports, will all be closed. All of this, in a sense, any eatery for that matter, hotels and restaurants will all be closed. All hospitality services will be out of reach, except for those that are catering for the frontline workers, for those involved in the emergency services. So if there is a hotel that has been turned into a quarantine center, obviously that will continue to function. But if you have a regular hotel or a regular eatery or a darshini, for example, say in a city like Bengaluru, they will be out of bound. You will not be able to eat at any of these restaurants. Restaurants shall also be permitted to operate kitchens for home delivery of food items. So home delivery, that has been the case up until now, will continue for the next 14 days. So no, that has not been barred, but yes, you cannot go and dine in at a certain restaurant. This is again one of the other important bits of information. Another question as to whether the cinema halls, the shopping malls will be open. The Karnataka government has been looking at it in a certain way, but the centre has come out and has asserted that none of these facilities will be open till the 31st of May. Cinema halls, shopping malls, gymnasiums, swimming pools, entertainment parks, theatres, bars, auditoriums, assembly halls, and all such similar places, essentially places where you can have, where there's a possibility of a lot of people converging at a point, all of these places will be out of bound. So once again, cinema halls, shopping malls, gymnasiums, swimming pools, entertainment parks, theaters, bars and auditoriums, assembly halls, and all such similar places will be prohibited, will be shut. Now, this is again an important bit of information. Sports complexes and stadia will be permitted to open. However, spectators will not be allowed. Now, this is interesting because we have the IPL coming up. So there have been a few questions as to how IPL will be held or whether it will be postponed. So it looks like there is now an option, a possibility of IPL being held in a closed stadium without any spectators, but all of it can be viewed on TV. So that again is a possibility. Moving on now, all social, political, sports, entertainment, academic, cultural, religious functions, other gatherings and large congregations have been prohibited. So obviously this is to ensure that there is enough social distancing, which continues to be the moot point right here. That is what the entire lockdown 4.0 guidelines have been surrounded upon, as to how to ensure that social distancing is maintained between people. So any such religious place or place of worship, as you know, are also places where you have a lot of people converging. So even they will be out of bound. That apart, all social, political, sports, entertainment, academic, cultural, religious functions or gatherings have also been barred. So no congregations, in a sense, no situation where you have people in large numbers coming together, that will not be allowed. Now, looking forward, let us now see as to what activities will be permitted, albeit with a few restrictions. Now, what we're going to discuss in the next couple of minutes will be valid only for the non-containment zones. So if you are staying in a if you are staying in a containment zone, then these next couple of instructions do not apply for you. We should start about how interstate movement of passenger vehicles and buses with mutual consent of the states and union territories involved. So this, in fact, is one of the biggest takeaways in the lockdown 4.0 guidelines, as to how interstate movement of passenger vehicles and buses has now been allowed. But there is a rider, of course. There has to be consent of any two states involved, or districts for that matter involved, even if it is a union territory. So suppose if you want to take your bus from Karnataka to say Tamil Nadu or Kerala, then both the states need to be willing, in the sense that Karnataka should be willing to let its bus go outside of its state, and say Tamil Nadu or Kerala should be willing to allow that bus to enter its state. So it's only when both the states are willing, then you have travel that can take place. So interstate movement of passenger vehicles and buses has been allowed, but the states have to be willing. Interstate movement of passenger vehicles and buses as decided by the states and union territories. So the nitty-gritties and the technicalities will have to be decided by the individual state. And if suppose a state which has been badly battered and bruised, for example, Maharashtra. Now obviously you will have a case where Maharashtra will decide that there will be no form of travel in or out. So that question really remains. It is all left to individual states as to what they want to do when it comes to the interstate movement of passenger vehicles and buses. Moving on, standard operating procedures for movement of persons, as mentioned in Annexure 1, shall continue to operate. So even when it comes to the movement of persons that has now been allowed in the form of interstate travel, it has to be done while ensuring that there is enough social distancing that is maintained, and while also ensuring that temperature checks are done. No asymptomatic, in fact, only asymptomatic people, in a sense, only if you are not exhibiting any of the symptoms will you be allowed to travel. And even while you're in the bus or a certain vehicle or a car, you need to be ensuring that there is enough social distancing that is maintained. That is what, in a sense, the annexure speaks about. So let's go ahead and give you a few more important details. Now, when it comes to the containment, buffer, red, green and orange zones, you will have a new demarcation that will be done. The delineation of red, green and orange zones will be decided by the respective state and union territory governments after taking into consideration the parameters shared by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. So, as you know, the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has been keeping a close tab on the number of cases that have been rising. So based on the fresh inputs that they will be getting, you will have a fresh demarcation of all the zones, that is green, orange and red, and also the containment zones. So you may have states or cities where suddenly the number of red zones may increase, or maybe they may even go down. It all depends on how well the city has been able to keep a tab on its number of cases eventually. In fact, Within the red and orange zones, containment zones and buffer zones will be demarcated by the district authorities. That is what we were just discussing, after taking into consideration all of the guidelines. And when it comes to the containment zones, only essential services will be allowed. Take for example Bengaluru, we have about 17 active containment zones even as we speak. So in all of these 17 containment zones, in a sense 17 wards, only essential activities will be allowed. There will be a strict perimeter control to ensure that there is no movement of people in or out of these zones. So that is what we've been trying to ensure as to how, once you have a containment zone that has been established, how to ensure that people do not get in or get out. That's been the main focus, and the Ministry of Home Affairs, also the NDMA, have laid focus on that. And except for medical emergencies and for maintaining supply of essential goods and services, there will be no form of travel in or out of these containment zones. Now, when it comes to the containment zones, there shall be intensive contact tracing, and house-to-house surveillance will also be done. Other clinical interventions, as and when required, will be done in all of these containment zones. Yes, one more important point, night curfew will continue. We've been speaking about how from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. you're not allowed to go outside. That will continue till the 31st of May. And cities, district officials, the cops have also been given a free hand to impose Section 144 as and when required. Protection of vulnerable persons. The Ministry of Home Affairs and the NDMA has also gone ahead and spoken about how the persons who are above the age of 65 and those with comorbidities, pregnant women and children below the age of 10 years. Now, these are people who are vulnerable to catching COVID-19, and they've ensured, the Ministry of Home Affairs has gone ahead and said that all of these people, anybody who's above the age of 65, anybody who's got comorbidities, and if you're pregnant, then and also if you're below the age of 10, you will have to stay restricted to your home. And only if there is essential and health purposes are you allowed to venture out. Again, you need to have that all-important pass. And all other activities will be permitted except those which are specifically prohibited. Yes, one more important point, Arogya Setu has also found its mention in Lockdown 4.0 guidelines. This particular application that in a sense helps track the spread of COVID-19 has been suggested, has been advised by the government that every person who is heading out or every person who is working at an office must install this Arogya Setu app. And they've spoken about how this will facilitate timely provision of medical attention to those individuals who may be at risk or who may require the same. This apart, special directions have also been given to ensure movement of persons and goods in certain cases. All states and union territories shall allow interstate and interstate movement of medical professionals, nurses and paramedical staff, sanitation personnel and ambulances without any kind of restriction. So when it comes to the emergency services, the Ministry of Home Affairs and the government has understood that their movement is essential and has to take place, and that has to be allowed. All states and union territories shall allow interstate movement of all types of goods, cargo, including empty trucks. So a few instructions there coming in as well. Let's come to the end of Lockdown 4.0 guidelines. No state or union territory shall stop the movement of any type of goods or cargo for cross-land border trade under treaties with neighboring countries. So there will be no stoppage of movement of goods, cargo for cross-land border trade under treaties with neighboring countries. So we're talking about how, if suppose there's supposed to be a good, important item, for example, the hydroxychloroquine, these elements can continue to be exported, and there will be no prohibition on that. There will be a strict enforcement of all the guidelines. All the state, union territory governments will not dilute any of these guidelines issued under the Disaster Management Act 2005 in any which manner. And all district magistrates have also been strictly asked to enforce all of these above measures. In order to implement these measures, the district magistrates will deploy executive magistrates as incident commanders in the respective local jurisdictions. The incident commander will be responsible for the overall implementation of these measures in their respective jurisdictions. So you have a new post that has in a sense been created, who is the one-point contact. He or she will be held responsible to ensure that all of the guidelines that we've just discussed are practiced, are implemented in any of these zones. If suppose anybody is found violating any of these guidelines, any of these measures, then action will be taken under the Disaster Management Act. under the section 51 to 60, and legal action will also be taken under section 188 of the IPC and other legal provisions as applicable. So there you have it. This is what Lockdown 4.0 looks like. One of the biggest takeaways, of course, as to how interstate travel has now been allowed. So people who've been stuck in a state can now head back to their home states. How well will this pan out when it comes to the migrant workers who are still trying to get to their hometowns? Several questions do in fact arise as to how well will governments ensure that this interstate travel is done in a way that the spread of COVID-19 is not more. So yes, these are a few important pointers. The containment zones, when it comes to the containment zones and the red zones, status quo will be maintained. None of the relaxations will be applicable. Only essential services will be allowed. And when it comes to the green and orange zones, none of the spots where you'll have a possibility of too many people converging will be allowed. So all of the malls, restaurants, pubs will be shut. So this is what Lockdown 4.0 looks like. Not sure if you have left a few comments or questions. I shall get back to my Facebook Live and respond to the questions. But yes, I hope you've gathered, and I hope I've answered all your questions as to what will be open and what will be shut till the 31st of May. The need of the hour is, yes, staying at home, maintaining social distancing, and stick to Namaste. Many thanks for joining us.